Good morning, ultimate hustlers and digital empire builders. It is that time for the Cortez Hustle Show, and today we've got another fire episode for you. We are talking to Trevor Oldham. We're talking podcasting for dollars, but it ain't what you think, right? When you think podcasting for dollars, you thought, oh, Cortez, you want to teach us how to make money from a podcast. No, that's not what we're talking about today. Today, we're talking about how to raise capital as a real estate investor by getting on podcasts. Who knew that was a thing? Well, obviously, Trevor knew it was a thing because he created a whole business model around it, and we're going to be talking about that today. So I need you to do me a huge favor. If you know anybody in the real estate investing space, I need y'all to tag them in this episode. I need you to comment the name of your business and or your brand, and I need you to smash that share button, ladies and gentlemen, and let's kick it this morning. Yo, what's up, ultimate hustlers, and welcome to the Cortez Hustle Show, the business podcast for the entrepreneur of the 21st century. And I'm your host, Cortez Hustle. Our goal is to give you a behind-the-scenes look at how the world's greatest hustlers build amazing brands, scale their businesses to incredible heights, sell more, make more, and create mass movements that impact the world. It doesn't matter if you're a seasoned vet or you're sitting on the sidelines with aspirations to one day unleash your inner hustle. This show will provide the insights into how pure grit, determination, and hard work has morphed into some of the most iconic brands and personalities and how they are moving the culture forward. You'll get a mix of solo shows featuring yours truly, as well as interviews and content from other hustlers that I either know personally or I've learned from or whose grind I've come to know and respect. And you'll also get exclusive recordings from our membership called Monetize My Life Academy, which you can check out at monetizemylifeacademy.com. That's a program where we go live every month with some of the best hustlers on the planet, sharing best practices on how we all can explode our brands with advanced branding and marketing tactics, business development strategies, and financial game planning necessary to build the empires we all desire. Again, that's at monetizemylifeacademy.com. If you like today's episode, chances are the hustlers you're connected to will like it as well. Share it with those in your network. And when you do, use hashtag Cortez Hustle so I can see you and hopefully give you a shout out and share you in my stories. So check out today's episode and make sure you subscribe to the feed on your favorite podcasting networks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cortez Hustle Show. I am, of course, your host, Cortez Hustle, everybody's favorite fatherpreneur, coming to you live and direct from the Monetize My Life Blueprint Studios here in St. Louis, Missouri. Listen, if you're trying to figure out how to create digital products using PLR, then I got a free guide that teaches you the top 7 ways to profit from PLR content. Go to monetizemylifeblueprint.com to download your free guide today. Welcome to the stream, man. We're talking about how to leverage the power of podcast interviews if you're a real estate investor to raise capital. I promise y'all, I did not know that was a thing, but we got a special guest today who's going to break it down for you and how it all works and how he can help you as a real estate investor leverage the power of other people's audiences to raise capital for your real estate investing projects. A couple quick announcements before we bring out Trevor Oldham. Really just one announcement. This Sunday night, we're actually doing PLR Profits Live. You guys have been hearing me talk a lot about private label rights content as a shorter pathway to creating digital products to help you expand your brand, but more importantly, to help you serve more people. And we're actually going to do a live workshops this coming Sunday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we're actually going to walk you through the process of choosing a good PLR product, how to rebrand, package it, how to put it into your websites, your sales funnels, how to deliver it, all of that good stuff. If that interests you, just comment PLR and I'll make sure you get that special invitation to that. So I got a message about this guy who was doing this amazing thing. And you guys know I love to bring you not only successful entrepreneurs, but successful entrepreneurs who are doing something slightly different or unique, in my opinion. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs and all different types of business, but I have never heard of anyone using podcast interviews to raise capital for real estate investors. And I just thought it was very unique. So when I had a chance to bring this young man on, I was like, yeah, this is going to be good for our audience. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to some of you guys and present to others, Mr. Trevor Oldham. Good morning, Trevor. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you? Excited to be here.
Glad to have you, man. I'm extremely excited about this conversation. This is something like I love to learn new stuff, right? And to me, this is something very new. But before we get into who you are and what you really do and how this whole process works, we start every episode of the Cortez Hustle Show with a quote of the day. And basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a quote, and you can either chime in on mine, or if you have your own favorite quote that you like to share with our audience, by all means, feel free to do that as well. Today's quote says this: sometimes we're so concerned about giving our children what we never had growing up that we neglect to give them what we did have growing up. I don't know about you, Trevor, but that hit me like a ton of bricks. Do you have a favorite quote that you like to share, or do you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, most certainly. Yeah, I think my favorite quote, and I can't remember it for word because it's pretty long, but there's a Steve Jobs quote out there, and basically the whole premise of the quote is just about thinking differently and how you're going to go through life, and really it's just about his process of building up Apple. And my favorite, you can really hear the whole quote if you go and listen to his Stanford commencement speech he gave back. I believe it was 2004,
Mhm.
2005, and really the whole premise was just thinking differently. And when I think about him and how much he changed the world, unfortunately, I wish he was still alive. I think, the advances
Yeah.
Apple would make as a company would be so much greater. But just that process of just thinking differently, and you look at his life and realize, he created, basically the iPhone, and and the other products, and even though he was thinking differently, he was still let go from Apple at one point in his career, only to come back and build it up to the company that it is today. And I think that a lot of times when people are going out there and building businesses or trying to better themselves, you have to be thinking differently. You can't be thinking like the masses. And so just hearing that quote from him, and really it's almost like a 15-minute commencement speech all wrapped up into one quote. So I can't remember it word for word. I used
Yeah.
to have a paragraph quote in front of me. I don't know where it went at some point in my office between moving a couple of different times. But yeah, just the whole premise behind it is just thinking differently, and really just not caring what others think about you.
Yeah, and I think that is incredibly important because if we could get advancements thinking the way everybody else is thinking, then we'd all be further along, right? It takes
Mhm.
that maverick to go out off the beaten path. In a lot of cases, actually do an about face and go completely against the grain of what everybody else. It's one thing to go in your a different direction, but it's something totally different to march towards the common thought and go in the opposite direction. And sometimes that is completely necessary. So I love that quote, man. So that is the quote of the day right here on the Cortez Hustle Show, brought to you by your good friends over at Monetize My Life Academy. It is the premier school for online entrepreneurs. Check out monetizemylifeacademy.com. So Trevor, I ask everybody that comes on the Cortez Hustle Show this one question, and I'm gonna ask it to you, my friend. You don't get to escape it, right? And the question is this: who the heck are you?
Yeah, I think I would say entrepreneur, first and foremost, and looking back on my life and going back through, really my family and wondering, where did I become an entrepreneur? And I feel like it started sort of like with my grandfather. He
Mm-hmm.
died when I was, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 or 10. I was pretty young when he passed away, but
Mm-hmm.
from the stories I've heard of him, he went out and started his own business. It was a multi-million-dollar business. And again, I can't remember exactly what he did. I believe it was in the financial services industry. So I look at
Mm-hmm.
him. Then I look at my dad. He was in sales for quite a while, and he was very motivational. I mean, he was listening to folks like Jim Rohn and Stephen Covey, and attending all the seminars, and meeting
Mm-hmm.
those great motivational and self development folks before the sort of the new influencers that have come on in the last couple of years. And I look at my brother, and he's tried to start a couple of different companies. He joined you can knock on it, but an MLM company,
Mm-hmm.
network, that sort of type of company. And
Yeah.
he was just trying to build something better for himself. And he was, there's this sort of, pharmaceutical product that he was trying to sell. And, eventually it didn't end up working out. But I mean, he gave his heart and soul into it for 2 years, so I could see the drive between the two of them. And I really just remember growing up just wanting to make money on my own, not exactly sure how I'm going to do that. And I remember
Mhm.
going door to door lemonade selling. I remember buying and selling baseball cards that I would
Mm.
find. I would go into the local department stores and I would buy at the time designer clothing that you might get like Ed Hardy. I don't know if his
Mhm.
clothing is in style anymore, but I would go and
Right.
find it. You could get at like a TJ Maxx or Marshalls, some of those big department stores. You could buy his shirt for $20 in those stores, and you could flip it for 40, $50 on
Mhm.
eBay. I remember putting up signs to mow people's lawn, just really anything that I could do to make money on my own. But I never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur. Never really knew the name, but it really wasn't until I was a senior in high school and I started to wonder, is there more than just working a job again? I didn't really know that I could go out and start my own business or even be an entrepreneur. And I remember buying a book on Amazon. It was very small, it was probably ghost written, it was like 40 pages, pretty plain, but the biggest
Mhm.
aspect I took away from it was that the folks that are wealthy are the ones that have started businesses. And so I
Mhm.
thought to myself, well, I've tried these little things, in the past, and then that led me to going. I remember looking at my dad's face when I went on Alibaba, and for those of you who don't know, it's basically you can wholesale products from China, and I bought like 50 phone cases for like $100, and went to
Mhm.
go and sold those. You're talking $2 cost. Started selling them for $10 a pop on eBay. Long story short, that was at a time when Alibaba was kind of the wild west where all the products were knockoffs. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, the plan didn't work out as well. But just really looking back, it was sort of like that was like the start of my entrepreneurial journey. Looking at my grandfather, looking at my dad, and looking at
Yeah.
my brother, and they've always fostered it. They never like turned down my ideas. They always encouraged it.
Yeah, and that's so empowering to have. Turn your computer down for me just a little bit.
Hmm.
There's some feedback coming, but it's so empowering to have, Trevor, the people who you had the best of both worlds. You had not only them encouraging you, but you also had people who modeled it in front of you. And I remember my mom; she couldn't even say the word entrepreneur. She would say entrepreneur. And she's like, You're going to be an entrepreneur, and I don't know what you're going to do, but that's what you're going to do. So because she felt that in her spirit so strongly, she was right there with me, my only customer. I did a lot of MLMs. My biggest residual income and my biggest success in business online came through network marketing or direct sales opportunity, and I still get a residual check from that today. So she's been there with me, but before that success, there was a lot of ones that failed, and she was a lot of times my only customer in some of those. But she was just trying to encourage me down the path of entrepreneurship. But I wonder sometimes how different would it have been if she had modeled it in front of me. So that's amazing that you had that. Let me ask you this: did you ever pick up any of the books or the material? Because I know your dad, if he's following Stephen Covey, then I'm sure he's got a library. Your brother, if he's in the MLM space, I know he collected a library of books because that's big in that culture. And that was one of the things that I picked up. Did you ever pick up any of those books from them, and glean any insight from the personal growth and self development space or the positive motivation space, the mental attitude space? Did you ever stumble into any of those libraries?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story about that. So when my dad moved around, he just got tired of moving the books around with him. So when we finally moved to we had moved around quite a bit. And when we moved to our last town, which they've now lived in, I don't know, probably 15, 16 years. And my dad decided he didn't know if I was going to read them. My brother wasn't interested in them at the time.
Mhm.
So he donated them all to the local library. And then the local library, they basically have a book sale every couple of months and they display out
Mhm.
all these books. And then sure enough, I was really interested into entrepreneurship and building a businesses and wanting to learn. I would go to the library book sale and buy as many books as I could on
Mhm.
entrepreneurship and business. And of course, a good majority of those were the books that my dad had donated to the library. He had no idea at that time, but yeah, reading has been so essential. Just in my room. Yeah, I don't know if you can see around. You probably can't see too much around me, but I got it looks like four different bookshelves full of books, and I have books in my closet where I ran out of bookshelves. And that's just been the
Mhm.
biggest thing. I remember the first time No, I don't want to say first time. First year really into entrepreneurship, I think I read 50 or 60 books, and
Wow.
that may not be the best because it's hard to apply everything that you learn in the books. But I was just trying to
Mhm.
learn as much
Yeah.
as I could. Where now I'd rather read one book or 1 month period or 2 month period and like really go through it
Hmm.
and ingest it and take action from it. But yeah, books have been so essential. And I remember when I was just starting off in entrepreneurship, I had a friend that was building businesses at the time, and he gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's almost like a
Hmm.
staple. And he had me read that. He had me Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Those are
Yeah.
really the two staples when it comes to building businesses and entrepreneurship. And I read those books, and it was funny. I remember my dad used to go into like the local bookstore, and I'd be like, oh, this is like pulling teeth to get me going there. Now when I'm home and I'm visiting with him, I'm asking him if we can go to the bookstore so I can see what new books they have that I might have not known. So it definitely changed. But yeah, books have been absolutely essential in my growth.
Yeah, full circle, man. And that to my quote earlier, we want to give the kids some the things that we never had, and we forget to give them things that we did have. That study, that curiosity, that hey, get better, and this is one of the ways to get better through reading books. And I'm a big YouTube video guy and podcast listener and audio listener. But I remember that's the one thing that I really that helped me in the network marketing space is I was with Amway for about 5 or 6 years, didn't make any money, but the environment though was so rich with positive mental attitude. And they had a tape of the week program and a book of the month program. And I still have some of those books today. And that was probably 20 years ago that I was in the Amway organization and learning and growing. But sometimes people don't realize it takes that to transform your mind. It takes longer for for some people, longer than it does for others to get out of that employee mentality into the entrepreneurship mentality and then start taking action and get the experiences that really accelerate your growth. So kudos to dad and brother and grandpa for pursuing their dreams, and that was something that you could see and to live up to as well. What was one thing that so did you end up from high school going to college, or did you know out of high school was it always entrepreneurship, or did you end up going to college, get the corporate job, and then realize what, I better go ahead and do my own thing, right? How was that process?
Yeah, yeah, most certainly. So yes, I went from high school, went to college. At that time, I was trying to build businesses, but nothing like too successful. Maybe generating
Hmm.
$100 a month in profit. So definitely nothing to live
Hmm.
off of. Sort of just anticipated going the college route. Realized about halfway through, I was like, is it worth it or not? But I was like, I already spent so much money on this, I might as well just
Yeah.
continue on for the final 2 years. Again, sort of building my businesses and going out there and working a corporate job when I got out of college. The big thing for me was just how can I make as much money to just get rid of my student loan debt, and that was a big
Hmm.
thing for me. So
Yeah.
worked that corporate job for about a year and a half, and then just been doing the podcasting business since. So it was at a time where I probably could have left the corporate job a little bit earlier, but I
Hmm.
like the money. And it helped me pay off my student loans. I was able to pay off. I think it was a little over 90,000 in my student loans in a year.
Wow.
Just by
Yeah.
living super frugal and taking that income. Dropping my bank account really down to $1,000 in it, and
Hmm.
basically everything that I would make from my business, everything that I would make from my corporate job, put everything really outside of expenses. Not living fun for a year. Putting those all on my
Hmm.
loans, and got those paid off, got those knocked off out of the way. And that just, for me, I wanted to have that freedom and flexibility to know that if I
Hmm.
ever left my job, I would have minimal debt, I would have
Yeah.
minimal expenses. So, running the business is super risky. There's ebbs and flows in it. There's market predictions where working a job is nice and steady.
Hmm.
Obviously you can get laid off. You can see the layoffs happening at Facebook and Twitter
Yeah.
and, the other tech companies going around right now, but typically those are going to be a little bit more stable where, running your business, more risk, more reward. So if we're going to be
Hmm.
taking that more risk, I'm very conservative approach where how can I get my expenses to be as small as there? And I just wanted to make sure like, I didn't have a $1,500 a month student loan payment coming in that I would have to worry about,
Yeah.
for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And to get that out of the way, gave me that freedom and flexibility. And I think sometimes you see these entrepreneurs that are just like go all in and burn the bridges where, yeah, to a degree, but you also got to be smart about what you're doing. If someone doesn't
Mhm.
have that, the business in place, doesn't have the income coming in, it's going to be insanely difficult. So I just wanted to set myself up success before I went the full business route.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly smart. I actually did it the reverse. I didn't replace my job income before I left the job, and it brought a lot of stress into our
Mhm.
household. I was excited, and typically the thought is, well, if I'm doing well part time, I'll do even better if I go full time. And that's not the case because you literally have to discipline yourself and figure out how to fill that time with income producing activities. And it takes a while to figure that stuff out. So kudos for you for being smart. But 90,000 in a year, like that is amazing, and doubling and tripling down on those payments and really putting everything into your plan, right? That to me helps develop, I'm sure, the character that you have as you pursue your own business. Like, hey, I got a plan, I got a goal to relieve myself of this debt so that I can really focus on my business and not have the proverbial monkey on my back of
Mhm.
debt, trying to worry about how am I going to take care of my business, meet payroll, and turn around and take care of my personal debts. And wiping that stuff out was super, super smart on your part. So congratulations on that, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
No problem, man. Listen, we're at our favorite segment of the show, which is a segment that we do call 1 minute motivation. That's why I'm gonna play a short motivational clip, usually 60 to 90 seconds or so. I'm gonna ask you to give a couple takeaways, and I'm gonna give a couple takeaways as well. So let's get into some 1 minute motivation right here on the Cortez Hustle Show.
We all have that in us. We don't
Mhm.
know how strong we are until we have to be strong.
Yeah.
And so we're not taught in school resiliency. We're not taught how to handle rejection. That's why so many kids are committing suicide, being bullied, because they have a limited, weak sense of self. Dr. Martin Seligman, who wrote the book called Psycho-Cybernetics, who discovered self-image, that we need to have a curriculum that builds a person's sense of identity. Once your life has a sense of identity, that gives your life a sense of purpose. And once your life has a sense of purpose, that gives your life a sense of direction. And so Nietzsche said, if you know the why for living, you can endure almost anyhow. When you know why you're here and what you're supposed to do with your life because of that time that you've taken to ask yourself some questions of why am I here? What's the meaning of my life? Mark Twain said, the two most important days in your life, the day that you're born and the day that you realize why you're born. Most of us don't take the time to get quiet and get still. Most people die at age 25 and don't get buried until they're 65. Most people don't put their minds around the reality that life is God's gift to us and how we live our lives is our gift to God.
Whoo-wee, Trevor, I don't know about you, my friend, but that hits me. I'll tell you why I love this segment so much, especially when we have a guest on the show, is because we all just listen to the same clip. But based on where you are in life, what you've been through in life, chances are you heard something very different. So, what did you hear, my friend?
Yeah, first off, I want to say a great quote. I always enjoy listening to Les Brown, and hearing him talk. I think there's, the biggest takeaway I think I took from the quote is, definitely people they'll come out of school, they'll work a job maybe that they hate for the next 40 years, and they
Mhm.
never really think to themselves, hey, is there something that I can do to change my surroundings? Is there something else that, is this the norm? But I feel like the biggest piece that I find is the resiliency piece, and especially when it
Mhm.
comes to building a business. And I can see it. My dad's a teacher now. After leaving sales, and you can just see like it's almost like how they call all these kids, where like you have to walk on eggshells. You can't be too mean to them. If they mess up,
Mhm.
you can't fail them, and that's not going to set them up for success. Whether that is going out there and getting a corporate job, after school,
Mhm.
even a let's say a blue collar job after school. If you just you don't feel like doing it and you don't want to show up, any
Mhm.
manager is not gonna be happy about that. And then even when it comes to running a business, no one's gonna tell you how to be resilient when you're running a business, especially when it comes to school, when all of a sudden you have an employee that's billing you for 2 weeks at a time, then you realize they haven't been doing no time, or you have an employee and they just disappear, no rhyme or reason. They're just gone forever. They show up 4 weeks later saying, "Oh, sorry, something came up," and you got clients knocking on your doorstep. What are you going to do when the business is going slow, then all of a sudden your payroll costs are more than the monthly income that you're bringing in? These are difficult conversations to have. No one's going to prepare you. Like last February, I had to fire an employee that had been with us for over a year because the business was struggling at that time. I made a couple of bad decisions, and had to turn the business around, and ultimately got the business turned around. But no one tells you, what that feels like when you have to go to someone and say, "Hey, I gotta let you go," and the feeling how bad you feel on your end. School doesn't teach you that, and I think most people go through life, they sort of get beaten down, and they sort of just let themselves get beaten down. And I think, like, for me, a big eye-opening thing was my student loans, where I was like, well, this sucks. I'm $90,000 in student loans. Well, what can I do to figure it out? How can I figure out how to pay it off as quickly as possible? And I think a lot of people right now are dependent on the government, which is not to say it's a bad thing, but at the end of the day, you got to take responsibility. Like, I was the idiot that took out $90,000 in student loans, and I'm the person that's got to figure out how to do it. I don't think people take enough personal responsibility on their own. You really got to figure it out. For me, it took me 7 years of grinding before I really made any good sizable income in my business, and there was a lot of ups and downs. There was a business I'd run for 2 years, and I burned the bridges with friends and family, and I was going all out. I'd be up at 3 a.m. working, I'd be up late at night working, doing everything I could, and the business just didn't work out. And I wouldn't call it a failure. Some could call it a failure, but it was just not the business for me at that time. And then you become in a dark place for a couple of months where it's like my whole identity was built around building this one specific business. How do I pull myself out of it and move myself forward? And then eventually the next business became the business that I now run, the podcasting space. No one teaches you how to do that. No one, there's no playbook to tell you how to pull yourself out. And I think people just let themselves get knocked down, and then that's it. They never pick themselves back up.
Yeah, and they often say that it's not getting knocked down that causes the fighter to lose the fight. It's not getting back up, right? But that's also the challenge. No one teaches you how to get back up. Nobody teaches you how to recover from a failed business attempt where, like you said, you burn some bridges and all of that kind of stuff. Nobody teaches you how to go back and repair those things and man up and apologize. And man, I was wrong. I was so laser focused and I allowed that to cloud my judgment and ruin our relationship. Nobody teaches you how to bounce back, but you've got to figure out how to bounce back at the end of the day, period. And one of the things one of my coaches started to have me do is take cold showers. And I didn't get it. And I was like, man, what is that going to do for me? But to your point, when we're raised in a society where everyone is coddled, everyone is shielded from hard times and adversity, you say, well, when you're taking a cold shower, you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation voluntarily. So when an uncomfortable situation shows up in your life involuntarily, you're already used to handling that. And I was like, oh, it makes so much sense. And I'll tell you, Trevor, cold showers in the wintertime, brother, in St. Louis, they hit a little different because I started doing it in the summertime and I was like, oh, this is a piece of cake. But, in the wintertime, it's a whole different thing. But you're right. We're not taught resilience. And that is one of the most biggest determining factors for success, because any person who's ever wanted anything had those moments. Michael Jordan had to go through the Pistons and through the New York Knicks and Indiana before he finally started winning championships, and they beat the crap out of him. But it made him a champion. Sometimes we are avoiding the things that will make us a champion because we don't want the embarrassment. We don't want to fall down. We don't want to be looked at sideways. So appreciate your commentary on that. That, ladies and gentlemen, is 1 minute motivation. Do not forget that if you are an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow a business, one of the best businesses to grow, or one of the best ways to grow an existing business, is to add your own products and services. And we're in the digital product creation space. So Monetize My Life Academy can help you create your own digital products based on your gifts, talents, special abilities. We help you package and present them to the marketplace. We have all the systems. We have all the tools. All you got to do is go to monetizemylifeacademy.com. You can test drive the system for $1 and see if you like it. monetizemylifeacademy.com. So Trevor, you mentioned a couple times that first business didn't fail because of your perspective, the way you look at it. Other people can look at it and be like, man, you wasted 2 years of your life. But you and I both know that it was that business, that experience that gave you the fortitude to do what you're doing now, which is, let's talk about it, right? So how did you get into the space that you're in now? How did you discover that it's a thing? Like podcasting, is a thing. And some people will say, well, sure, everybody's got a podcast. But then you're saying, well, there's a way that we could leverage podcasting to grow other businesses. So how did you discover and stumble upon this idea before you actually launched the official company to make it a thing?
Yeah, I think, really the story starts, sort of looking at like the step-by-steps I took, when it came to running this business. So I think I previously mentioned first started buying and selling those phone cases that I'd buy on Alibaba. And then, that obviously can't be selling knockoff phone cases. That's not a good business model. So went from that, started importing bracelets and watches. And those are great, those are great products. Built an online brand with those, selling those items, really used a lot of influence and marketing to build that company. Was realizing as much as I enjoy selling bracelets and watches, I want to start a motivational based company. So, fast forward another year, I started a motivational based company. And it was really within that company that after about a year of being in it, I realized I wanted to go out there and start my own podcast. So I started my own podcast back in 2015 and ran that podcast for about 2 years, able to interview some awesome entrepreneurs and real estate investors. And that was with the company that I was previously talking to you about, where, really grinded for 2 years. And unfortunately, the company didn't work out. So when that company, stopped doing my work for that company, started freelancing my skills that I had learned, that I had basically learned on my own through running that company, especially in the podcasting space. And the skills that I had learned were editing shows. It was writing show notes for shows. I had booked guests for my own podcast, and I was booking guests for other people's podcasts. And one day I came across a turnkey real estate investor based out of Los Angeles, and she wanted to get booked on podcasts. I thought to myself, well, I've booked her on a couple of shows. I thought I've booked a lot of good quality guests on my show. How hard could that be to book her on shows? Started working with her. This was back in 2017. Continued to do the freelance route for another year of just finding guests or finding clients to be a guest on podcasts, and realized after about a year or so, this could actually be a viable business. Brought on my first employee because I wanted to scale the business. I realized I couldn't be on my own and doing it forever. Started to, add on that new employee. Fast forward about a year, added on a second employee, and just really growing the business from there. And then eventually realizing that the niche I love to work most with is folks in the real estate investment industry, turning into the business to only helping folks, really in the investment industry. This was made that decision about 2.5 years ago. And then what really switched the business for me and what really allowed me to grow past that 6-figure mark and to really grow the business was now all of a sudden, instead of what we used to do basically is do a pay-as-you-go service. So someone would come to us, we would book them on a podcast, and they would pay us, and that was the end of it. Well, sometimes we would be chasing down the invoices. Sometimes our client wouldn't show up, and they wouldn't want to pay their invoice. So pretty much a nightmare. So then all of a sudden we flipped it into a high-ticket offer, where now instead of someone coming to us and say, we're going to book you on a per podcast basis, you're going to come to us and you're going to pay us $3,500. We're going to book you on 10 podcasts. You're going to pay us up front. We're no longer chasing invoices. That allowed our company to grow. And then even in the last year, I was like, okay, we have these folks in the funnel. They came in at this $3,500 price point. How can we monetize it even further? And all of a sudden we started adding a recurring revenue service where they go from, say, that $3,500 package for 10 podcasts. It takes them a couple months. Now we offer them 2 podcasts a month for $697. Then we start doing that, and we start building up the reoccurring revenue stream where now I don't have to worry about income coming in, because that was a problem for about a year where I was constantly having to generate new revenue all the time, and that became kind of became annoying, trying to get new clients all the time. So how can we monetize our current clients and really built the brand that way? It's really been a 5-year progression. I mean, I didn't even have a website the first year. I was just doing the freelancing work, and in the second year I had a website, but I built it for myself through Squarespace, and it was good. It was feasible, and I think it wasn't even until like the middle of year 2 that I was like, okay, I should start to invest some money in my company, and actually hired a web developer to build us a website. And it's just been a journey of just figuring its way out. I never knew that I was going to be in the podcast booking space. It just happened to be the space that I realized I enjoyed the most, and the space that happened to be the most profitable on my time. Whereas editing people's podcasts, writing show notes, there's a lot more competition out there. There's hundreds of companies that'll edit your podcast out there for you. So how can I go down into the niche where there's only 6, 7 other 8 companies, and what can I do to niche down from even there further? And that's in the real estate investment space. And part of the reason I chose the investment space is, one, I love working with the folks, and then 2, if we do have a high ticket offer, someone that's just starting out is not going to be able to really afford it. But usually a real estate investor that's successful, that's been in the business 5 or 10 years, $3,500 a month, when they're making a couple $100,000, even $1 million off a deal, it's typically a little bit easier to work with.
Man, listen, you hit on a lot of stuff that I hope my audience is picking up. That first business that some people will quote say failed taught you a skill set that you later monetized and opened the door for you to see a new opportunity. And a lot of people will say that business failed. I'm not doing anything that has anything to do with that business because it didn't work out, right? But it helped grow you into the person that you need to be. And I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I heard someone say that before you can become a 7-figure entrepreneur, you got to become a 7-figure human being. And that first business, that life experience, watching your dad in the sales arena, watching your brother try to make MLM work, and the books and the first business and all of the micro businesses before that, kind of help you become a 6-figure human being before you started your first 6-figure business. And without that failure, chances are you wouldn't have the skill set that you had and the relationship that you created through your own podcast to then come back and say, boom, here's an opportunity. Here's a lane for me to use the skill set that I've already developed to grow something special and amazing. So was there ever any hesitancy for you to go from low ticket to high ticket, right? Because I know, or pay per result to high ticket, because I know pricing is something that a lot of entrepreneurs deal with. What was the mindset and the mentality that you had when you made that pivot?
Yeah, I think for me it was, one, I didn't want to just keep living like this. It was it was tough to get by. Doing to give you an example, we might charge $100 per podcast that we would book our clients on, and we'd only charge them on the day of the interview, the day that they had their interview. So sometimes the interview could be a couple months out, could be a couple weeks out. So it was hard to really turn a profit like that. And I thought to myself, well, I just want to generate more revenue for the company. And at the end of the day, if this doesn't work out, this doesn't work out, and I'll go back to the lower ticket item. And what I realized since doing that is there's people that I talk to, and they're like, that's just too much money. I would never pay that. And just as many people that say that, how many people do I talk to? And they're like, okay, sounds good. Let me sign up. Send me the invoice. I'll get that paid right away. You're always going to have those folks that are always going to say, no matter how cheap you are, they're going to say it's overpriced. And then you're going to get those people that, no matter how expensive you are, you'll be like, okay, our biggest item is a 6K package. And I had a client ask, hey, can I do more podcasts, more than our 6K package? So next thing I know, I have a check coming in the mail for 8K. And that's the biggest check that we've had, to date, which was a nice one to receive. in the mail,
Love
and you
it.
realize that, for me, it was growing up sort of in that scarcity mindset. There's not enough money.
Hmm.
I don't want to be taken
Hmm.
away from other people. And then you start to get around these successful people, and you realize that there is enough money. I mean, there's what, 350 million Americans.
Hmm.
Obviously not
Hmm.
everyone is going to be wealthy, but there's going to be enough, especially in, almost in any market, they're going to be willing to pay your price, especially if you do a good quality job
Yeah.
with them. But yeah, the biggest thing for me was just I want to grow my revenue. I mean, really looking at the company, I think the first year we did a couple of $1,000s in revenue. Nothing big.
Hmm.
Sort of getting my feet under the door,
Yeah.
and then I think we did about 10K the next year, and then we did 50K going commission, and then the next year
Hmm.
we did 200K. This is year 4 in revenue. And then now we're going to surpass that this
Hmm.
year.
Hmm.
Because now we have the high ticket and we have the reoccurring revenue. So it's sort of like a
Yeah.
a stepping stone. And I realize, if I'm going to do this business, I can't be living off 50K a year. I want to
Yeah.
really build, substantial
Hmm.
wealth for myself, and 50K, but I also have a team to pay. It's not like it
There
was
you
like
go.
50K in profit,
Hmm.
and Uncle Sam's got to come in and take their cut, and I got to
That's
pay
right.
for everything that goes on. So it's just been, stepping stones sort of over time, and I realized that by having fewer clients coming in the door on these high ticket items, it makes it a lot more manageable for me to realize, like, okay, maybe I need to go out and hire someone new. Where when you tell them, oh, it's a pay as you go service, we could pick up 10, 15 new clients in a month. And then all of a sudden, then it's trying to corral the horses. Someone says they're going to sign up, and we get them all set up, and they disappear, or they,
Yeah.
they don't want to pay their invoice. And,
Hmm.
it's that sort of thing. Once you let the horse out of the barn, it's hard to reel them back in. And I realized I'd rather pick up, 2 or 3 new clients a month on this high ticket offer and then transition them to reoccurring
Hmm.
service, a couple months down the road. And that's very suitable for me. Like in this past week, I have to look at our business. We picked up 5 new clients. It had been a little lull for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden 5 new clients are coming in
Yeah.
the door, which is phenomenal. But then now it's a lot easier for me to go through and say, okay, let me look at the time that my team's putting in. Do I potentially have to
Hmm.
go out and, hire an additional employee to help us take care of this? Where you're talking 10, 15 clients, that's really hard to
Hmm.
manage coming in
Hmm.
all at once, especially when, I try to run a lean operation. I don't want to just hire people just to hire people. I want to, there's have just enough so no one's going to be bored, and I'm not just
Hmm.
wasting my money. And that was something I had to learn in my business. I had to working through my business coach where, my expenses at one point, like 75% of my expenses were from employees. And really you want to get that down to about 30%. So that's when I had to end up firing that person. And my payroll,
Hmm.
because at that time the payroll was like 15K a month, and which is not bad. But I mean, when we don't have a
Yeah.
recurring revenue service and I have to sell 15K worth of new product every single month just to pay the
A new
bills, that
business
makes it
just to cover
a little bit
payroll. Yeah.
difficult. So try to run a little bit leaner, run a little bit leaner of an operation. But having that high ticket item definitely helps out.
Yeah, and like Richard said, and I've heard it said that many times you realize you end up doing the same amount of work for a low-paying client as you do for a high-paying client, right? But to your point, if you're bringing 15 low-paying clients on, now you have to have fulfillment for 15 clients versus fulfillment for just 3, right? And the revenue is way greater. Another thing that you said is that you niche down, right? There's a great debate going on in the entrepreneurship space, especially the online entrepreneur space, to niche down or not to niche down, to serve everybody or to hyper focus. You decided that, you know what, we're only going to book for real estate investors. What made you want to work exclusively for them? You said you kind of like working with them. What is it about the real estate investor in general that makes you say, you know what, that's my kind of client? I only want to serve people in that space. What is it about them that makes it such a joy for you to work with them?
I would say first and foremost, the most friendly people to work with. When I take like a business coach on as a client previously, they can be cutthroat because they're all going after the same sort of clients. And not to say that real estate investors aren't going after the same sort of, leads. If you're raising capital, you need to have those accredited investors, those folks that have a high income, your doctors, lawyers, and dentists. But everyone I've come across in the real estate investment space, they're just super
Mhm.
nice and friendly. And it's like, if I get an investor in my deal, I'm not necessarily taken away from your deal, where I felt as though in these other niches, it was very cutthroat, where the real estate community is very warm and welcoming. And I wanted to go towards the people that are building wealth and not just building wealth through their business. How are they building passive income streams?
Mm.
You say it's passive income, there's obviously a lot of more work that goes into it than that. And realizing working with these investors, they're just a joy to work with. They don't give me nearly as many headaches as I got with the other niches
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
previously worked with. And really, from a business standpoint, it came to a point where, I started the business in 2017. There's actually a handful of other companies, two or three that were in the business prior to me. They got started back in 2013, which is pretty awesome. To think that
Mhm.
people are using podcast guest marketing, all the way back in 2013. I said, they were the first on scene. That's their sort of
Mhm.
business. How can I build my company up? Going after clients, and I realized, going after the same clients as them, necessarily wasn't going to be a successful
Mhm.
recipe. So that's why I decided, if you're a real estate investor, I'm the business to go to. If you're a business coach, I'm not the business to go to, and I can refer you to a
Mhm.
different partner. And that really allowed me to build a brand, especially when it comes to like LinkedIn and writing content and talking about it. And all I do is, network with investors, and it just
Mhm.
makes it so much easier to sort of build a brand, that, hey, you want to go on podcasts in the real estate space, I'm the person to go to. And it just makes it a lot easier than sort of trying to be the company for everyone, where
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to sell someone when they're coming to our company and say, hey, why should I work with you instead of the company down the street? Well, you're an investor. We only work with investors. Where if
Mhm.
someone comes as a business coach and says, hey, why should I work with you over the other company? It's a lot harder to have a conversation because there's no real reason why they should work with us over those other companies. There's no sort of competitive advantage that we have, other than we hope that the person likes us more. Where being very specific, we do have that competitive advantage in the space.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And you get to build the relationships with the podcasts that are best suited for
Hmm.
real estate investors. All of your processes and procedures are built for real estate investors. It allows you to be more efficient because you already know if you've worked with dozens of real estate investors, you know exactly what they need and how to serve them and how to be there for them. And to your point with the content, and for all of you guys who are listening, I don't care what business you have, identify your target because when you know who you're talking to, you know where they hang out, you know what to say to them, and you know how to serve them. And that just makes it easier for you across the board. How are they using the podcast? Do they have special scripting in terms of raising the capital for their businesses, or is it just the fact that you're giving them the exposure on the right podcast that those listeners are more likely to be in a position to invest, and that's how they're raising the capital?
Yeah, you said exactly. Just getting them the right exposure on the right podcast. It's targeting those shows. So typically, when someone's coming to us and they're raising capital, most deals that someone's going to be investing in, usually a minimum of 50K to 100K. Sometimes you may get a minimum of 25K. So typically, if someone's going to be investing that money in a real estate deal, they're going to have capital. And if you're looking at a W two employee, who are the really the W two employees that are going to be having this type of capital to invest with them? Typically, it's
Mhm.
going to be your doctors, your lawyers, dentists, medical sales professionals, and then even business owners as well. So it's our job is to go out there and place our clients on these shows that are targeting those industries. So, for an example, there might be a show called The Passive Income Attorney, teaches attorneys how to build up a passive income stream. There's one called Rigs to Real Estate, teaching folks in the oil and gas space how to build a passive income stream through real estate. So it's really going
Mhm.
out there and placing them on those shows, where sometimes I might just want to go on any real estate show, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like if we're placing our client that's looking to raise capital for a deal on a podcast where it's focused on newer investors, typically a newer investor is not going to have that capital to
Mhm.
invest with our client. So who has that money to invest with them, and just going out there and placing them on those shows. And typically we don't like to script it for them exactly what to say. Each person has their own individual story, but we typically tell them that most folks like to hear an A to B story. And what I mean by that is, how did you get started in real estate? Most people aren't born in real estate. 90% of folks that are in real estate had no real idea about it beforehand. So how did you go from, say, 0 units to all of a sudden owning 200 units, 500,000 units, $100 million in assets under management? And that's the A to B story. How did you go from 0 units? How did you go to 500 units? And then as the interview goes out, you go through the whole story from point A to point B, so that way the guest can really get to know you. And you don't want to be overly promotional and say, I got the best company, we offer the best investment returns. And, I'm a part of a investment community, and the host puts out a weekly podcast with a lot of these folks that are raising capital. And I can tell you, you can tell right away when people are like, this guy's just way too overly promotional. I would never invest with them. Luckily, they haven't said that about my client, which is my clients, I should say, which I hope I'm doing a good job with them. But you can tell, at the end of the day, really when people are listening to podcasts, they're looking to learn. They're not looking to be sold to. There's a point in time in every podcast when you can sell your product or service to them, but they don't want it to be an hour-long infomercial where you're telling how good you are and how good your company is. Really at the end of the day, they're trying to learn from you, and they're trying to learn, your market, your industry, and especially as a real estate investor, why are you investing, say in St. Louis, and why are you investing in mobile home parks in St. Louis or multifamily? What drew you to there? And that's what the audience is there really looking to learn and understand your investment philosophy, not how much money you made on your last deal. Or that's great, but that was your last deal. You have another deal coming up. Is that deal going to be as successful as the previous one? And especially in the real estate market right now with rising interest rates, a lot of investors are left holding the bag, not doing too good depending on the type of loans that they took out for their deals. So it's really, are you protecting yourself in this market where, you look at 20 and 2021, I mean, you could almost go out and buy any property and, it almost, I don't want to say double, but it would appreciate, 20, 25%. And then investors would take out that 25% appreciation, pay back their investors, in a year. I mean, there's not a lot of things you can make a 25% return on in a year. So it's really, do you know your stuff and you know what you're doing? You're not overly promotional. That's really what the audiences are looking to hear.
Gotcha. I love that, man. And so niche down, went from low ticket to high ticket, and then you added monthly recurring, bro. I tell everybody this story. My mother-in-law wanted me to lay a floor for her, right? I'm pretty handy. Say, hey, son, there's, I want to replace my kitchen floor. I know you can do it for me. And I said, Mom, I only work for 3 things: passive income, residual income, and ownership. I can't own the house that you're in. I can't lay this floor one time and get paid for it over and over and over again. So you have to find somebody else. And of course, my wife chimed in and said, you do get paid over and over and over again if you catch my drift. So needless to say, I laid the floor. But that monthly recurring revenue piece is so big, and we don't have time to get into it today, but I'm glad to hear you say that you added that, because as entrepreneurs, there's nothing worse than having to start over every month from zero. And that's why I do what I do. And the software as a service space is like, hey, it's monthly recurring, right? I know what I'm going into next month with revenue-wise in my business. And it gives you a sense of peace, and you can budget and you can do things and you can make better decisions based on what you know you have versus hoping to go get 4 new clients this month so you can meet payroll. So, brother, we're almost out of time, but we've got one more segment that I've got to get you on. It's my second favorite segment on the show, and it's a segment that we call freestyle, because I know you got bars, Trevor. No, freestyle is our opportunity. As I'm building this multi-billion-dollar international media conglomerate, starting with this podcast, I realized I didn't go to school for this. I'm not a broadcast journalist. I don't ask the right questions all the time. The conversation doesn't go where I want it to go all the time. So freestyle is your opportunity to either reiterate something that you feel is important, or if there's something that you wanted to touch on that we haven't talked about yet, then take 2 minutes and share that with them. So this is freestyle right here on the Cortez Hustle Show, the Trevor Oldham version. Hit them with your best bars, bro.
I say the best thing I would recommend is when you're going out there building any sort of business, just learn as much as you can. And it's okay if you're not going to be successful in the business, if you're not generating a ton of revenue. Like I mentioned, it took me almost 6 years to pass, 6-figure mark in my business. And during that whole time, reading books, like I mentioned, the first year, I read about 50 or 60 books. I don't know if I'd recommend that, but, it was great just to learn as much as I could. And then I was listening to podcasts, and it was going to conferences. I remember I went to Grant Cardone's conference shortly after I turned 21, flew out to Las Vegas and attended that. And I think Les Brown might have been one of the speakers there, at that time, which is cool to see him speak in person and hearing from Ed Milet and just putting myself around those people and just, again, my business really was, I don't even know if I had my business at that time, it might have just been in the infancy stages, but I was just trying to learn as much as I can and to be around those people. And, even if your friends and family aren't entrepreneurial, just listen to podcasts, read books, and it's really going to change your mindset. And that's really the biggest piece of advice I would give to anyone, is just continue to learn and and really just to never stop learning. Even today, continuing to listen to podcasts and reading books and doing those things that I did early on in my business, but now they click a little bit more as I've learned and grown.
Boom, drop the mic, man. Bars right here. That is the freestyle version with Trevor Oldham right here on the Cortez Hustle Show. I love what you're doing, brother. I love your approach to business and business growth and personal growth, and how you were able to continue to evolve. And in that growth stage, you were talking about reading books, but don't forget, y'all, his biggest growth came from execution. Even though executing what he was putting his heart and soul into for 2 years didn't pan out, it led him to the next thing. So really quickly, Trevor, tell everybody how they can connect with you if they are real estate investors and they want to get better exposure. They want to learn how to raise capital using podcasts, get booked on shows. How can they connect with you?
Sure. So they go to our website, Podcasting You. So that's podcastingyou.com. Or they can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, just my name, Trevor Oldham, and feel free to connect and shoot me a message. I'm always active on there as well.
I love it. I love it. I love it. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all see why I do the podcast, right? It creates opportunities for me to create amazing relationships with guys like Trevor. See, a lot of people don't know, Trevor, that I do this podcast for 2 reasons. Number one, I'm selfish, right? I get to get some amazing free coaching from my guests who got some amazing stories and some amazing success that they're willing to share with other entrepreneurs, right? But also I get to open a door and expose my audience to entrepreneurs from all over the world, all walks of life, all different types of businesses. Everybody has a unique story as to how they got into entrepreneurship. Some just wanted to fire their bosses. Others fell in love with something that they wanted to give to the world, and that became an entrepreneurial journey for them. So this has been an amazing show, and I'm glad that you had the time to share with us your unique perspective and your unique business model for leveraging the power of podcasting from the other side of the seat. A lot of times when we think about podcasting, we think about the podcast host and the podcast guest, but we never really think about someone who has a business of getting people booked on these podcasting shows. So thank you so much for your time. That's going to do it for us here on the Cortez Hustle Show. Trevor, hang out with me for a second. But until we talk to you next time, I want you to get your money up, because you absolutely can do it. But more importantly, you deserve to do it, each and every single one of you. Now hustle up. But you've got to overcome fear if you're going to win.
You're tuned into the Cortez Hustle Show. Please like and subscribe.